All right, kiddies at home, if you're watching this video, okay, real test Friday, or sorry, practice test Friday, real test Tuesday, because we're not school on Monday. Totally forgot about that. So practice up.
Everyone's gonna die. Thank you for what you did. It's not because you died.
What's that?
No.
What'd you say, Jackson?
She said that you might literally die.
Oh.
That's what a racist would say.
Listen. You don't get a day for yourself until like after you pass away.
Well, you had to do some good stuff too, right? Like nobody's gonna have Jabin Burnworth Day after this.
Like we're definitely not gonna give a birthday now.
True. Pretty big. We don't get school off for again, so
Yeah,
it
yeah,
count.
exactly.
Well, exactly.
I'm not shooting you.
Yeah.
Jesus, kids.
Man.
I'm not
Thank you.
At least you can get a group chat.
Thank you. With a group has been a long day.
She was happy about the dead tree. Like I said,
Oh my God, it sounds like
Wait, no, he was shot. You're happy he
The
was
only
shot.
one that would be kind of question. Like walk that shit.
One time Henry tried taking a semi through that.
I don't know. I've never went through cold. That's what I was gonna say. Is it McDonald's walk that
Who are we waiting on? There's more than 11 people in this room.
Huh?
There's more than 11 people in this room.
I'm not.
Yeah.
Why?
No.
Here we go.
Swift drivers. Yeah, it was turned in and you like, man, I got turned around. The king of the Dude, that's you see, I was we're like all the way inside.
Did they like try to rap?
No, they was good.
Wait, are you talking about the guy that?
No,
He went down the exit of home.
they were like intermediate.
Okay.
You saw it?
I got on 31.
That's trying hard.
Nice. Let's do it again.
No, it's the Midwest culture.
Yeah, the egg.
you know we're in the lead.
Like Wednesdays, I might not
Can't
have
know for a while. Wait, is this individual still?
Yeah.
It's in What do you know? Another one I don't know. Look, if you'll ask, I'll tell you. But somebody bring those two. That's just There we go. CJ back with
I was saying, man, you
What's
better
that one?
step it up.
That was
Luke.
Let's go.
They went to lead. You better hurry up.
Oh, shoot. Oh, another lucky yes.
Oh.
It's true to CJ. I think you're good.
Oh.
What is it?
Oh yeah, you're
It's not
good.
heck yes. I can tell you that. Let's go.
Come on.
I may have yes.
Don't mess it up.
You're messed up. It's not the glue. Let's go.
Nice. Let's do teams once. Good job, folks. Teams once. Let's see how we do. I like to hear you say it. I know. Okay, we'll get there. Here's your teams.
I don't have it. I don't have it. Like you're on mine. Yeah. I don't know.
Pretend your favorite place.
No, I don't think so.
On your team.
Shoot, is that the? Right, I don't know that one. Hey, Gavin.
Which one was that?
Oh, that's Medialis? Nope, just kidding.
Intermediate.
Yeah, listen, okay. Stop.
And Randy Morris. Wait, that's the end of the numbers.
Come on, dude. All you gotta do is get her paid.
Sure.
All you gotta do is get a Rottweiler. Problem solved. Dude, you're going crazy.
Who's on my team? What are you saying? Yeah. Wait, no.
Oh.
Primate of Poland. I didn't have that. Very much.
Yeah.
Imagine being called the primate of Poland.
What's that?
So, you know, Nicholas Copernicus?
I literally didn't even.
The helix and the-
Yeah, right.
I know, I didn't mean to.
So they found his remains. They matched the bodies. They got hair samples from Wilkium. They got that from Sweden. They took his DNA off his skeleton. Some things were missing, like I think his jaw. And so he was given a second funeral by a dude newly named Primate of Poland. I don't think I'd want that name. That's like calling me the ape of Poland.
That's it.
Oh, it's a temptation.
That was still, no, it's a lot, yeah, but. Like the last one, whoever it is, click it. There we go. What?
You got second place.
That's crazy. All right, let's get our Chromebooks away for a little bit. Let's talk about a few things here.
They caught that guy. So the guy took the van in the mansion and just trying to fill up with gas. Oh, there it is. And then.
Well,
so they
All
got
right.
out of the way in the van. We're gonna give her part of the gas. Well, the police made it try to go somewhere besides.
So you gotta like, just get like.
Or park it somewhere. And then the next day, one of these guys would split his custody.
All right, here's where we left off yesterday. We were talking about the reticular activating system and that idea that we drive somewhere okay, we fall asleep, okay, or not, sorry, we don't fall asleep. We fall asleep in class, or we drive somewhere and we forget where we're going. Hopefully you're not falling asleep when you drive, though I have done it, and those are some scary moments when you're waking up and you're in gravel, right? You know, one time I drove straight to Isle Royal National Park, well, the boat to get there. I was like maybe 20 minutes away, and all of a sudden, like I've been driving for 14 hours, and it was like, Hannah was like asleep, and I was going to sleep. It was not good.
That's why I carry crunchy things in my car.
What's that?
That's why I carry crunchy things in my car, like a bag of pretzels.
Oh yeah,
So there's
right,
crunch 'em.
right, yeah.
I know somebody that, I think they're driving from California back to Indiana, and they got extremely tired, and so what they did was stay awake. They took tools, they had a toolbox in their back, with like wrenches and screwdrivers and everything. They took that whole thing and dumped it into their seat and sat on it.
Oh yeah, I can see that. Hey Jenna, I'll never forget your grandpa told me once. He used to be a salesman, right? So he had to do a lot of traveling, and he told me that there were times where he'd be driving and he'd like roll down the window and drive with his head out of the window just to stay awake at like 2 o'clock in the morning and stuff like that. I always remember him telling me that. It was a great story, and I may have told you that before. I'm sorry, but there you go.
This is my grandpa?
Your grandpa, Jenna.
Oh my gosh.
He was, you know, I love that guy, and he said, yeah, there were just times where he was, you know, he'd get so tired, and so I used that a couple times when I was doing long trips. I was like, okay, Eldon told me, put the window down, drive like a doll, you know, put your head.
That is so funny.
Oh yeah, can you picture him? I can't, you know, I
No,
laugh.
I can't. That's why it's so funny.
Yeah, totally did it.
Like a monster.
All right. So I like to think of it like this. This is the thing that trips me out too. Okay, all of our brains right now. Okay, if you look around the room, all of your brains are recording everything about things in this room, and even like details like what people are wearing. Okay, so Tarina's got a red Squire basketball shirt on. Okay. Trayson's got a North Face sweatshirt. Okay. Guys sporting the vest today. That means nothing to any of us, ideally, right? We're not going to remember these things. Okay. And part of that is the filter of the reticulating activated system. Okay. So reticular activated system. So got to remember that this is, okay, right here's the foramen magnum, right? Okay, in the skull. Okay. This hole right here where my finger is, that's where your brainstem is. I cannot get into the brain without going through this. That's why if you damage the brainstem, you're dead. Okay. So I like to think of it as like a filter in that your brain kind of shuts down when information isn't what seems to be relevant. Okay. Now, unfortunately, sometimes you're missing things, right? I have some people first period, I called them out. I said, like, you know, sometimes these kids fall asleep in my class. I try to like be entertaining and move around and call people out, but there's a lot of other factors there too. But hey, maybe you're not interested. I get it. Maybe you're forced to take this stupid class. And so you're like, whatever, I'm going to space out. Maybe you're on drugs. I don't know. Okay. Could be you hit the cart a little too hard in the early morning hours, right? Okay. There's a lot of factors there, but the reality is that, you know, we've all been in those situations where, and this happens at church, not to rip on church, but let's say you've got this pastor that stands there and he's not moving around and his voice is very calming, and you stare at him and you're trying to concentrate and you don't want to make Jesus mad, but everything is the same. And so your brain says, yeah, I'm out and I'm sleepy time, right? Okay. You've done this maybe in classes. So I've had professors like this in college too. They're not moving around. There's no PowerPoint. They just have all this information and you're like, oh God, I'm going to go, I'm out, right? Okay. So your brain gets rid of that stuff. Okay. It shuts down because it's not interesting. Now I used to do this bit. I had to stop because it went too far, but I would like go into the prep room, much like I would do with my phone thing with the Z-line, and I would have a kid, sometimes a graduate, Okay. Sometimes people, like a buddy of mine from, the town come in and like punch another kid in the face and leave. And then I would come in here and I'd be like, what happened? And then I would ask you to describe the person, right? Some of you know the person, some of you don't. Fortunately, one time there was blood, and so I had to stop that. This is why we can't have nice things. Okay, but if this was a situation where, I'm going to ask you tomorrow, maybe what guy was wearing, like, what color was guy's vest. Now, like, if I didn't ask that, right? Okay, if we didn't talk about it, you probably wouldn't even notice. Maybe a couple of you are like, yeah, I think he's maybe brown. I don't know. I've seen that vest before, that sort of thing. But it doesn't matter. Now, if the situation where a stranger comes in, punches a kid in the face and leaves, boy, that's exciting, right? Like, who's that fat dude that just came in and punched Gavin in the, you know what I'm saying, right? That stimulates your brain. That's why Angela, I wasn't worried about her when she was driving and running over every runner that she passed, because your brain would like remember that. You understand what I'm saying? That's what your filter does. Yes.
I'll come in and punch a kid next year for
All
you.
right, that'd be fun. I'll give you a list of who I want punched. How about that?
It'll be a serial punch.
Yeah. Do you ever have this? You ever like dream about something and you say to yourself like, "Oh man, I wonder why I dreamed about that," and then you trace it back and you're like, "Oh my God, at lunch we were talking about this and that led to that, and that's probably why I dreamed about that sort of." You guys with me on that? Have you done this before? No? Yes? Have you ever made out with somebody in your dream and you see them that next day? You're like, "Oh my God, they know we made out," right? Nobody's done that in here? Oh man, I hope you do someday. It's weird. I've had those dreams before. I'm like, oh my God, they know what happened. All right, so let's talk about the cerebrum, okay? And this is what it looks like. Okay, we'll come back to the list here in a second. Okay, but you got to know that there's these fissures and there's these things called gyri and sulci. I'll come back to the big screen in a second, but I want you to notice the ridges are called gyri, the grooves are called sulci. I want you to say that with me because they're kind of hard to say. Okay, gyri, sulci. Okay, all right. So our hemispheres are much like our bones. Okay, this is the frontal. Okay, this is the parietal. This is the temporal, and this is the occipital. Okay. Now the insula, you're like, what about the insula? That's going to be inside. We'll talk about the insula a little bit later. Okay, but the lobes, okay, frontal, parietal, temporal, occipital, right? Pretty easy. Hopefully all of you at this point are like, yeah, we got this. We got the ridges gyri, the grooves sulci. Let's say it one more time. Gyri, sulci. Okay, good. All right. Now, let me show you a picture of what it looks like in real life. Okay, your brain. Okay, here's that superior view. Here's more of a lateral view. Okay, we've got those two hemispheres. By the way, it always drives me crazy when people say like, oh man, we only use 10% of our brain. If only we could use like 100%. Imagine what we could do to change the world. Okay, that's just total BS because we do use our whole brain. We're just not using it the way, all at once the way. I'm going to show you some connections later. We're also going to talk about acid. So those of you that are into that sort of thing, we'll talk about what happens to your brain when you be tripping. All right. Okay. So it's crazy. There's a lot of interesting research. I have a great book if anybody wants to read it about that. Okay. But look at this outline. The frontal lobe goes here. Okay. Right. Like this. Okay. The parietal lobe up here like this, the temporal off to the side, and the posterior, okay? Or sorry, the occipital in that posterior part. Okay, so let's talk about, we're just gonna talk about this part here, the frontal lobe. Remember Colonel Sanders yesterday talked about how all the aggression and motivation, all those things were in the alligator's brain was because of a large medulla oblongata. Okay, I need to actually look that up. Okay, because in humans, that's not where it is. Okay, it's in the frontal lobe. Now, I will tell you this, the frontal lobe, when I talk about the brain, I'm going to put two fingers up here like this. Okay, right? Okay, and my middle finger here, this one, okay, is in the frontal lobe. Okay, this one is in the parietal lobe. And there's a very specific reason why I'm doing it like this and then like this, because this is the motor area, okay? If I want to raise this finger, okay, I'm going to do it on purpose, just because, you know, right? Okay, so that's the motor area, okay? I can't raise this finger. You don't raise that finger, right? Okay, without a little meaning behind it, right? Y'all with me on this? Wink, wink. Y'all with, huh? Yeah, yeah. Can I get a, oh, yeah? No, thanks. Trying to incorporate a lot of TikToks in my lessons these days.
That's so old.
I love that one. Oh, it's one of my faves. Can I please just get a, oh, yeah? Okay. All right. Now, there's also a reason why my index finger is in the parietal lobe, and we'll talk about that in tomorrow, actually. All right. So let's talk about this area of the frontal lobe. Okay. So a lot of people say this is kind of where your personality comes from, and again, the brain is a little bit plastic, but before a lot of pharmaceuticals came about, we had to take a look at how do we treat people with things like ADD. By the way, ADHD is not a new thing, okay? Right? When I was in elementary school in the 70s, it wasn't like people were labeled ADD and ADHD, okay? But there were, okay? Looking back, I'm like, oh man, that kid, right? If I, like he was definitely major ADD, right? Okay, I've never been diagnosed, but I'm pretty sure I got something. Okay, now, what would we do for those people? Well, there's a dude named Walter Freeman that thought we can correct some of that stuff. We can also help with depression. Okay, we can literally, we could cut off and by the way, it's not really a cutting thing. It's just basically going in. You'll see it here in a second with an ice pick and poking into that, permanently damaging the frontal lobe. Okay, right? We'll talk about it. Let's watch this quick little video. And by the way, the quality is not great, but I want to thank whoever made this, because they took an hour-long documentary and put it into 5 minutes, actually 4 minutes and 39 seconds. And they basically cut out all the fluff and just gave you the good parts. Yeah.
What did they do with their eye?
You'll see. You'll see here.
Smoking a pipe.
He was an idealistic doctor, hungry for fame, who would champion one of the century's most infamous medical procedures.
He wanted to solve the problems of psychiatry, and he wanted to do it fast.
The lesson here is not how a man can go off the rails, but it's how science can go off the rails.
Ellen Ionesco was the first patient to undergo a procedure Dr. Freeman had perfected only weeks before. He called it transorbital lobotomy.
In a transorbital lobotomy, Freeman would first have the patient rendered unconscious through the use of the electroconvulsive shock machine.
Just before he turned the switch, we all had a laying on of hands and went for a little ride.
Usually three convulsions are necessary, but in old people, a single one may be sufficient, while in a 30 young person, 4 or even 6 convulsions may be administered without danger.
The patient would then enter unconsciousness for a relatively brief period, but several minutes.
Now that the convulsion has subsided, the nurse holds a towel over the nose and mouth of the patient.
Freeman would peel back each eyelid, insert his ice pick, and with a hammer, tap through the brain, wiggle it about, sever the frontal lobes, withdraw it. And when the patient came to, he or she would be given dark glasses to hide the black eyes they've been given.
We didn't have a refrigerator, we had an ice box. The first ice picks came right out of our kitchen drawer, and they worked like a charm.
Turning now to the operation itself, very little preparation is necessary for transorbital lobotomy.
The instrument was put in above the eyeball and in the plane of the nose. you could feel it hit the roof of the orbit, and then with a tap of a hammer, you could knock it through. The whole thing would take 3 or 4 minutes.
This patient came to the hospital this morning after breakfast, and he will leave tomorrow afternoon.
There are reports which he proudly writes down in his diary about fellow professionals fainting as he proceeds in this, or vomiting.
Dr. Watts didn't say anything. He simply turned around and walked out. Spurred on by Freeman, the number of lobotomies performed annually soared from 150 in 1945 to over 5,000 in 1949. Despite the known side effects, there seemed to be an endless supply of willing patients. Ultimately, the fate of lobotomy would be settled by a pill. In 1954, a new drug called Thorazine began to sweep through state mental hospitals.
Thorazine was initially marketed as a chemical lobotomy. I mean, this was seen as a selling point that it produced results similar to lobotomy, but without, of course, all the risks of the surgery.
Freeman decided to move to Los Altos, California, to resurrect his career. Far from the reproachful Eastern medical establishment, he could try to bring lobotomy to new categories of patients.
If housewives found their early 1950s existence too depressing for words, why Freeman had a solution that would get them through their day happy as little lambs. If children were misbehaving, conditions we might now see being called hyperactivity disorder, why they might need a lobotomy.
Remember this face for
In
tomorrow.
all, Freeman lobotomized 19 children under the age of 18, including a 4-year-old.
You like ruined those. He's like literally.
By 1967, Dr. Freeman had personally performed more than 2,900 lobotomies. In February, at Herrick Memorial Hospital in Berkeley, he performed his last when a patient died of a brain hemorrhage.
I wonder why.
Freeman was stripped of his hospital privileges and soon retired from his medical practice.
You know what happened 16 days before this? You were born. I was born, yeah. All right. So who's up for it? Okay. I'm taking volunteers. We're gonna do one tomorrow right on the back table.
Tickle my brain with an ice pick.
Can you imagine though that that was the procedure, you know, like that was not for
This
you know.
guy had to know it wasn't okay. He just wanted to make money.
Okay, so tomorrow, okay, we'll because I don't want to start this right now and then split it up. Tomorrow, what we will do is we're going to talk a little bit more, and I want to ask you this question: do you think they're still doing lobotomies, or do you think it's maybe what?
They're not hooking up a shocking thing. Shocking.
Right. I'm not sure if they just tap or ice pick.
Yeah, probably not going in the eye.
We'll talk about it.
By the way, the electroshock therapy was like, that was kind of standard. Get this, my grandpa, he was in World War II, and he was in France, and he got shot in the arm. When he came back, he couldn't talk. Okay, no damage, no physical damage to his vocal cords or anything like that. So they took him to a mental hospital in Texas, and they administered several electroshock treatments to hopefully, you know, restart his brain. He did not talk. My mom never heard him talk. She was born when he was in France. Okay, he all of a sudden, like out of the blue, started talking 2 months before he died. It was the craziest thing. She'd never heard his voice.
That's the only time she heard him talk.
Yep. And then he talked a lot. He had some advice for me. He made up his own. I mean, he had sign language, but not official sign language. He made up his own sign language. So it was really weird, like growing up with a grandpa who couldn't talk, but you also had to learn his sign language. He just basically like spelled out words with his hands, you know, like, so this was B, P, D, You could kind of figure out where he was going, like B-U-L-L, and then he would like do an S-H. That's how he would, yeah.
Why, like when he started talking, he explained why he had to talk.
Nope. Wouldn't talk about the war either. He did his greatest advice to me was about women. And he told me right before he died to make sure I know how deep the river is before I decide to jump in. I like that a lot. Yeah, so that electroshock stuff, that was kind of like the standard. When you talk about the brain, like, oh, let's just shock it and things will get back to normal.
Right? We talked the entire time. We just didn't move.
Oh, yeah. There was,
So do you think he probably?
my
talked the
grandma,
whole
if my
time?
grandma knew, he would talk. I mean, she died before him. Oh my gosh. I would
And
love
he
to know.
Suddenly started talking.
It was weird. It was a break. I honestly do not think that he knew he could talk. And then all of a sudden he just started talking.
Really think so.
I really do think so.
Wait a minute, so he talked when he was in the war? Like,
He talked, yeah, in the war.
so
Yeah.
when got shot,
He got shot. He stopped talking after he got shot.
Was it a
A
shot?
shot.
From being shot in the arm?
Yep, shot in the arm. Like
No, no,
there was a
he
bullet
was
in his
like-
arm.
Yeah,
Huh?
he was like shot. From,
Yeah, he was shot. Yeah, his brain like,
No,
he's like-
we're talking about shot.
So
Shot
that
that
he
shot.
wants to
So,
know
like,
if like when he
he's like-
got shot, if he like went into shock,
Yeah.
that's what caused
Yes.
his brain to.
that's exactly what they believe caused him to stop talking.
like,
It was nothing to do, it wasn't to do with the physical bullet. Like he didn't get like, nothing
just,
was damaged here. His
holy crap,
brain,
I was
like,
shot in the
holy
arm.
crap, and the horrors of war, like there's some people that won't talk about war. you know.
Technically, you can get shot in certain places.
Well, yeah, you can get shot in the arm and like technically he could be fine, but like if it freaked, there had to be.
I'm thinking tomorrow maybe we should perform one of those.
I would not, Jackson, I would not be shocked if like he got shot and then other people around him died.
Well,
And just the
obviously.
trauma of that experience, his brain just said, screw it.
It's
Bye, everybody. Have a great day. Thanks for joining me.